What would be your message to any one of them who may be dealing with some stuff that's causing them some stress at the moment?
I'd say go and speak to your partner or look over the gate to your mate. Put your head over the gate and say, mate, I'm battling a bit here. Because you know what? He'd be the first bloke to help you.
What about those people who are family members or friends or mates that are worried about somebody else who might be going through something that's pretty challenging at the time?
Treat them with the utmost respect for a start, but actually help them in any way they can and tell them you're there for them. And you're only a phone call away, because talking is the first step.
Well, of course, you probably caught up on our podcast from earlier this week. Obviously, we got it out a bit earlier with a Friday night game ahead of us, but a special edition. It is Spud's game. Last year, we caught up with Stuart Lowe and Chelsea Frawley and a couple of others in the lead-up to the inaugural Spuds match against Melbourne, and this Friday night against the Bombers. We do honour the former captain. We've got a couple of special guests lined up on the program tonight. It's probably unusual that we would speak to a Richmond legend, and he certainly was that in Matthew Richardson, 800 AFL goals, the most goals ever kicked at the MCG, a champion of that club. And we often refer to people like Lenny Hayes as someone that was universally admired by supporters, not just of our club, but others. And I think Richo was that as well, you didn't have to barrack for the Tigers to love the way he went about it. And he also played 5 years under Danny Frawley, who coached Richmond from 1999 to 2004. And he is one of Spud's ambassadors for this game. Richo, nice to chat to you.
Thank you very much. Good to be on board, and thanks for that introduction.
Starting off with that coaching experience, obviously we admired Spud as a St Kilda captain and a champion fullback who you would have played against as well. But what was he like as a coach in terms of that whole package, tactical, motivational, etc.?
I think the first thing we noticed when Danny rolled up was just his passion. You know, he was very passionate, very emotional. He was still a young guy. You know, he was a very young coach. He'd only been out of the game a few years. He'd been at Collingwood under Tony Shaw for a couple of years. So you felt like you were on the same page as him, because he was still a pretty young coach as well. And yeah, look, he just created a really inclusive environment. Him and Anita, you know, all of the girls at the club felt really welcome. Anita really encouraged, you know, everyone to get together as well. So just straight away, there was just a really good vibe with Danny and his family coming into the Richmond Footy Club. And as a coach, I would say he had a solid game plan that we all knew. Now, it wasn't rocket science back in the early 2000s, but, you know, we had 2 or 3 things that we did, and we had some other team rules that we couldn't do, and we all knew what they were. So we're all on the same page. And, we had a bit of success under Danny in those first few years.
Now, go back to the start of your playing career. You actually played St Kilda first up, and Danny was playing as an opponent. How did you see him? How was he to play against?
Well, I firstly, I just knew a lot about Danny because I was a person that really loved the game. I was a mad Richmond supporter, clearly, but, you know, I took an interest in all of the clubs and all of the champion players, and Danny was, you know, one of the champion fullbacks in the game. So as a kid in Tassie, you know, I looked up to all of those guys, and Danny obviously was a big name in the game. So to actually get to then play on him in my first game, a little bit surreal, I guess, running onto the MCG for a start and then standing there. And, you know, I played a little bit on Jamie Shanahan that day, and I think I had a little bit of time on Sean Ralph Smith. I bumped into him at the Moorabbin at the Danny Frawley Centre last week, and he brought that up. So, yeah, but I remember standing next to Danny and just the size of him. You know, I was a little bit taller than him, but looking at him side on, you know, he was a thick man, and I was pretty skinny at that point. You know, I was probably only about 88, 89 kilos. You know, I ended up being well over 100 kilos as a forward. So I had a bit of growing to do. And I looked at Danny and I thought, I'm not going to beat him physically, so we're going to have to do a bit of running.
So you told the story earlier in the week about him after having run off him a couple of times. He said he was going to knock your block off if you kept running. So you kept running. What was his personality like as a coach, and how did that develop over time? I mean, we've heard over the last couple of years about his kind of softer side. Everyone knows his cheeky side and the aggressive side as a fullback. But what was he like, I guess, one-on-one as a bit of a mentor and a coach to you?
Yeah, he had a lot of different aspects to him, Danny, and you summarised them there. You know, he's a ferocious competitor. We know that. You know, a very passionate person, but, you know, he wasn't afraid to show his emotions as well. And, We spoke about this at the launch of Spud's game a couple of weeks ago at Moorabbin, but I reckon he was ahead of his time with that. When I came into the game in the early 90s, sort of 1993 was my first year, it was sort of one size fits all approach, and it was sort of knock people down, only the tough guys survive sort of thing. And, it was a pretty macho sort of alpha male environment. But Danny was one of the first, well, probably the first coach that I had that sort of showed his emotions, encouraged you to open up and be a bit vulnerable. And, if you're feeling a bit down, don't be afraid to express that. And then if you're feeling good, express that as well. But it created open dialogue. And, I think it was a really important part of who he was as a person. And he certainly brought that across the playing group as well.
What does it mean to you to be involved in this? And I guess by extension to that, how proud have you been of Spud? How proud of you or of Spud were you post his coaching career with everything that he did in that mental health space and pushing that message forward of opening up and that sort of thing?
Yeah, very proud of him. I mean, I used to see Danny a lot in the last sort of, in my 10 years plus in the media. I mean, we were working alongside each other. We did the All-Australian committee together for years, 6 or 7 years together on that. We went away and did some country trips together with Brian Taylor and a lot of the current day players and past players. We'd go to country towns and during the finals and did footy clinics. So spent a lot of time with Danny. And, he made people happy. Every time we saw him, you'd have a laugh, and I'd bump into him on Sunday Arbos in the media boxes, and I'd always walk away with a smile on my face. And I guess at times, there were probably times where Danny wasn't feeling that good in those conversations. He still made you feel good. So to then actually open up and get people to talk about their issues and face their problems and be open about them and be able to talk about them, I think it's very important, the work that he did. And, it's something probably more prevalent than ever at the moment with what, the world's gone through with COVID. I think there's a lot of people probably struggling in a lot of different ways. So it's more important than ever to open up, pick up the phone, have a chat to a mate, check in on a mate if you're worried about them. Danny was at the forefront of this years ago, well before COVID.
Yeah, we've seen the photos of all the ambassadors for the game this week. You've all had your own football with your own message on the ball. What was the message you wanted to bring across for this day?
I think it's just an opportunity, footy clubs and football in general and the community that we're involved in. You go to the footy and you sit around with a lot of people at the footy and a lot of people that play, and it's an environment where you can get together and be open and talk and get people together and have a good time. But it's also a time where you can chat and be around people and be connected and, not isolate yourself. And I think that's what footy does. It brings people together, gets you out of the house, gets you together in a community and gives you people to be connected to. And once you're connected to people, it gives you the opportunity to open up if you've got any problems. So that's what I see footy doing, and this game being able to do as well, to spread that message.
Richo, last one from me, mate. But favorite memories of Spud? We've obviously seen footage of him in the coach's box, and he had the ability to lose the plot every now and then. We've heard some stories from yourself over the years. The under the pump story, blowing up the footies in the team rooms and that sort of stuff. But is there a favorite moment of yours in your time with Spud that you want to share with footy fans?
Yeah, I think, a couple of the stories are well known. The night he had to go and pick up our star ruckman, Brad Ottens, from the St Kilda police station on Chapel Street. Haven't got time to tell that story now, but it's in footy folklore a little bit. Most people know that one now. The under the pump one, that was right before Danny sort of got the sack from Richmond, and that sort of summed him up as well, just his ability to bring a sense of humour to things, because he really was under siege at that time. I remember the day that it happened. All the media trucks were in the car park at Punt Road with the big aerials, and we'd be walking into the gym there, and you're getting door stopped by all the footy journos, and we had a team meeting that day, and that's when he walked in with the compressor to pump up the footies, and stood up in front of us and held it above his head, and we're all looking at him thinking, "What are you doing, Danny?" And this was a tense time. We all knew that he was probably going to get the flick, and he screamed at us, "What am I, boys?" And he's got the compressor up above his head. And then finally he sort of said, "I'm under the pump." And he brought humour into a really tense situation. I mean, we know what it's like in footy when the coach is under siege like that. And for Danny to have a laugh at his own expense, that summed him up, and he made us all feel, comfortable in a really awkward situation.
As we let you go, obviously last year, Stewie Lowe and Gary Lyon addressed St Kilda and Melbourne out on the ground. If you had the chance to talk to, say, the St Kilda boys before it and say this is what Spud was like as a coach, this is what he'd be telling you now, is there a message that you'd sort of relay?
Oh, I just think as a playing group, don't ask of your group more than what you'd be prepared to do yourself. And that was what I loved about Spud. When he first took over coaching, we trained hard, and he used to get out there and train with us. So he wasn't asking us to do anything he wouldn't do. I imagine that's what he was just like as a captain at St Kilda, down at full back, playing on all those gun full forwards, and just express yourself. There's so many great players with great individual talents, and I think at times in the past we used to suppress that as a footy industry. We all, as I said before, one size fits all. Now that's not the case anymore. Go out there and showcase what you can do, express yourself, be yourself, and have fun with it. And if you do that, I reckon you go a long way to winning the game of footy, but more importantly, just enjoying playing footy with your mates.
Well done on the other work you're doing here, Richo. Thank you for your time. And I think I speak for all Saints fans in saying I wish you played for us. So appreciate your time.
Well, I actually played mini league for the Saints, and Tony Locker once came all the way down to Tasmania to our little junior footy club on the northwest coast and presented the trophies at our best and fairest nights. So I thought the Saints were pretty cool back then.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks, guys.
We are here honouring his name and fulfilling his legacy with the establishment of the Danny Frawley Centre.
It is so fitting that as part of his enormous legacy, the Danny Frawley Centre will set about making a genuine difference to people suffering from mental health issues, including those who wore the same crest as Danny.
Well, Spida Everitt was our first guest back on our third episode in late 2019. A lot has happened in football. A lot has happened in the world since then. And it's great to get back catching up with Spida now. His first game for the club in round 1, 1993. Danny Frawley was the captain during that and his next couple of seasons at AFL level. And Spida, obviously, a key part of that St Kilda team that kicked on in the post-Danny Frawley years as well. But Spida, thanks for jumping on again.
No worries, no problem at all. Absolutely.
I guess your memories, if you go back to those early days as a teenager coming in with Danny Frawley as the captain, what are some of those memories of Spud?
Oh, look, I think you look now and you see, you have these leadership groups, you have dual captains, you have, all these leaders around the footy club. But, those days you had one leader, and that was Danny Frawley. He was the captain, and whatever he said, everybody did. And what I loved most, I think, about leadership and, captains those days, they led on the field and they led off the field. So he knew the difference between when to be absolutely serious and then when to actually go out there and enjoy yourself as well. But, when you're 18-year-old, and then when we're playing under 19s and, you walk into the change rooms and you first meet and, you see Tony Lockett and Nicky Winmar and Danny Frawley, and they come up and shake your hand and they introduce themselves. It's like, oh, yeah, like I don't know who you are. And ever since then, he's just one of the great captains.
Spida, you were a pretty cheeky type of fella. I mean, you still are, but a bit of a two-parter for me. But was there any point in those few years under Spud that he had to pull you into line and you copped a spray from him? And secondly, he was also pretty cheeky at times. Was there any kind of locker room pranks or anything that you remember with Spud?
Yeah, look, he didn't really pull us aside. He used to have chats to us. There's no doubt about that. And I think he had chats to everyone. And I still, I suppose the more fonder memory of that was not even when I was playing. It was only a couple of years ago when I was inducted into the St Kilda Hall of Fame, and before that he gave me a call and just said congratulations and kind of that work rate and the different work ethic that I showed towards the back end of my career there at St Kilda proved that I should have been there. So just even getting that and getting a personal letter written from him, telling just not how proud he was, but just in a way about how I've been able to change. So, I've still got that letter that, he only sent a couple of years ago. So I found that more so, the timing of that more so than, what happened, in the early 90s when he was our captain. But look, the prank side of Spud, I think, everybody enjoyed, and, we all love a prank, and, we all love having fun. But, I think, for me, the main ones were when the boys, he used to love dyeing his hair, but he wouldn't tell anyone he used to dye his hair. He was the oldest part of the crew down there. So one day he put a bit of a rinse through it, but it went a bit plum. So it was the plum rinse, and the boys used to get his footy card and scratch off his hair and draw it in the plum rinse and then get him to sign it. And the plum rinse footy card was definitely one of the highlights. And I think the other one I always remembered, I can't really remember who was driving, but I remember Gordon Foe got injured in Adelaide. It was Adelaide or WA, and he couldn't fly home. So Danny Spud took his keys and said, "Don't worry, we'll get your car home for you." And we went straight out to the pub as soon as we landed in Melbourne. And it was like a semi-race to get to the pub. And he actually smashed Fody's car into the back of another player's car. So I don't know. I can't remember exactly who was driving, but I know Spud was right amongst the whole lot. But they said, "Oh, that's right. We'll worry about that when we get out of the pub. Let's just go and have a beer first."
I was going to ask you what were the differences in the Spuds that basically throughout the AFL. You had the Spud as the captain, you had the Spud as the coach or assistant coach, and then you had the Spud as the media personality. That all those we sort of see a lot of in videos and that sort of thing. But you also had Spud behind the scenes, which I guess you got to know a bit of. Was there anything that you sort of go, that's how I remember Spud as the person, but not anything attached to the AFL or just who he was?
I just think he was like, it doesn't matter. And as you said, he wore 3 or 4 different hats, and he was able to manage those very, very well. But I think when you see him, he was just a down to earth mate. He was just, I still remember when Greg Stafford, fractured my cheekbone in the middle of the ground, and we're going to the tribunal because I rang him on the Friday and I said, "Look, I'll kick 2 goals and I'll take it easy on you, just having a bit of a laugh," when he was coaching Richmond. And he said, "All right," and I kicked 2, and then Greg Stafford fractured my cheekbone, and I went off to hospital to get it popped back out. And Spud rings me and he goes, "He didn't mean it. He didn't mean it. Just try and look after him at the tribunal because they needed him." He position, he could still have that mateship and that fun and that character. It all boils down to, he was just a great bloke. On and off the field, didn't matter when you ran into him. This is what makes it so devastating, what we've had to go through. But, he was just a lovable character every moment you'd meet him. And it doesn't matter if he was a coach, if he was a player, if you were sitting by him in the footy, if you were out having dinner, no matter to him, he was just that larger than life character that we all loved.
Last one from me on that. Obviously, you would have done probably a bit of match sim. I know Plugger and Stewie and things like that were down there, but did you ever get the chance sort of in sessions to obviously run alongside of him or play alongside of him? And I guess what were his strengths? I mean, we always spoke about his good record on Gary Ablett Senior because of his closing speed, his strength one-on-one against guys like Dunstall and those sorts of things. Did you get a chance to see him as a player up close at training?
Yeah, look, I think his strength, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, was being able to switch on and do the hard yards. And it didn't matter, those days what it was 400s or 200s, he would absolutely rip straight in, and didn't matter what the weather conditions were. And I think a sign of that was the fact that after every training session, you get into a couple of 100 sit-ups with Lowy, and so I think as much as you are a character and you have fun, the commitment to actually footy and getting yourself better. And I think he's one to say wasn't blessed with the most skills, but at the same time his determination was a fair bit. But it was he was one of those you cross that white line, he absolutely has a crack. You cross the other side, and that's all forgotten, and he moved on. But he trained the way that he played, and that was hard out every time.
Spida, as someone who played with Spud, who knew him off the field. How do you reckon he'd feel about Spud's game and the new Danny Frawley centre at Moorabbin?
Look, I think inside he'd be chuffed. If that was, it's so hard where you see these things and, you look at, the Warnie stand and you think, why don't they do this before anything? Why can't they make these decisions a lot earlier? It was always going to be a Danny Frawley stand. I think, he's the greatest player, one of our greatest leaders at the St Kilda Footy Club. So, look, I think, I think he'd be absolutely stoked, and I think he would sit there and, kind of sit there and go, why did it get to this anyway? So it's just a real hard situation. But, I think he'd be humble and he wouldn't want all the fuss. But at the same time, he knows for a fact that it will help so many others. And, it absolutely, the game itself, helping so many others and bringing light on the situation when we know he did. And, we only had to see his funeral, how many people got up and said, it's time that, things started to change. So I think that side of it, absolutely. But why to get to that, that's probably the only harsh one.
You do plenty of work in the media and everything yourself post-career and that. Has there been any temptation at any time to steal one of these jokes that Spud's told at any point, knowing how funny he's been over the years, and just sort of recycle it? Because you've got the Queensland crowd who probably don't know a lot about him, so you'd be able to get away with it, I'd reckon. Oh,
absolutely. I think you borrow anyone's. You don't borrow it, you don't steal it. You just add a little bit here and there to make it your own. That's all you do. So, yeah, look, I think the craft of Spud being able to get up and just absolutely roast everyone. You can only do that if you're friends with everyone as well. If you actually know these people and actually invest the interest and time to actually get to know them, that's the only time you can really do it. And that just goes to show how many people and the kind of person he is, because he knows so much personally about all these people and how far he can actually push people. So, yeah, look, I think, the great, unfortunately, it's because of the circumstances. It's great that people do follow the game up here in Queensland. I am in Queensland, and Danny Frawley name a few years ago probably wouldn't have been as big as it is now, unfortunately. But it is sending a very, very strong message, and that's only not even through the AFL world, but definitely through other sports as well. So if there's one positive that's come out of it, is being able to bring that awareness to it. So absolutely, if there's any Spud jokes that I can just add a little bit of pepper on and run with, I'll be running with them.
As we let you go, mate, Nicky Winmar, Hall of Fame yesterday. You were in a rare position where you would have put the ball down his throat a few times and he would have put it down yours, leading out a full forward a few times. A superstar, I guess, a comment on Neil Elvis.
Yeah, look, I think anybody that just sat in the gym and only worked on his biceps and his pecs was unbelievable. He never worked on those chicken legs, but he had the best biceps and pecs in the business. But yeah, look, I think when you look at Cars or Nicky Winmar, he was just he was fantastic. You call Lenny Hayes Rolls Royce, and you can go through a lot of St Kilda names, but when you see Nicky Winmar getting the ball on the wing, having a couple of bounces, and just doing that pass down, either Lowy or Plugger's throat, and it's only going to sit around about 3 or 4 meters off the ground and travel 30 or 40 meters and absolutely be lace out. Absolutely loved it. So yeah, for me, I think it's a great reflection on just a great player that he has been. And, the best thing about Winmar now, and I only ran into him and saw him at the Saints game a couple of weeks ago when he played the didgeridoo, that, he's got his life back on track, and, he's making the most of it. So it's just, it's fantastic to see. And it's great to see that, Winmar will be around the footy club for years and years to come. So I think that's another great story as well.
Spider, always great to catch up. You're always generous with your time, and thanks for jumping on.
No worries. And as we mentioned earlier, get out there, support the game, and it's going to be a huge game. And even in Queensland, we'll be supporting it here pretty hard. So go the Saints on Friday night. We can't wait.
The Saints have teamed up with Movember and will use the tribute match to help raise funds for mental health programs.
The club has put together a powerful video sending an equally powerful message. Conversation starts now.
It's time to talk.
It's time to talk.
It's time to talk.
Well, it was good to catch up with a couple of sides of the fence there. As I said, Richo, I think universally loved. As I mentioned in the intro, we often speak about a few of our boys, Robert Harvey and Lenny Hayes, that I think you wouldn't find football fans that didn't like either of those two guys. And Richo sort of had that flavour about him. He tore us a new one a few times over the journey. And obviously Spida, a wonderful player for our club, and played under Danny and won best and fairest and all Australians. And I think we would have seen a flag if he didn't do his shoulder in '97, as I think we reflected a little bit back when we spoke to him the first time. But yeah, it is Spud's game. We've caught up with a few voices over the years, a lot of his former teammates, but obviously last year Stuart Lowe and Chelsea Frawley in the lead up to the game. This is the second edition. Hopefully the guys, go out and do the right thing. And I think that's, it was important to get those thoughts from Richo about what you would say, and if you could pass that message on to the playing group. So I know we've all told our stories of Spud over the journeys, and we've all crossed paths over various stages. But yeah, I think it's really important that the club, you can never guarantee results or anything like that. But I think that's part of that message for me, is to understand on one point what Spud was putting forward, which is when it comes to, issues around mental health and the definition of being strong these days, and putting your hand up and not just suffering along in silence and suck it up and all of that sort of stuff. It's an incredibly important message, as Wayne Schwass said at his funeral. The narrative has to change in that space. But also, I think it's really important for a new generation of footballers, because footballers are born these days that never saw Danny Frawley play. They were born well after his career finished, that they understand the legacy that people leave at football clubs. We spoke about Nicky Winmar just then, and Spida himself. And I think for our playing group, I think any chance you can get, I know they go up to Ballarat for the camps and the like, that they understand, second longest serving captain, best and fairest winner, inspirational leader that didn't have a lot of success. And that would be my message, is that, it's a reminder, I think, that you're lucky to wear the jumper, and you only wear it for a short time. And it's always important to remember, Nick, the people that came before you and what they did.
Look, it's a legacy that looms large over the footy club, isn't it? And we've had this discussion a couple of times over the last few years now. I think we were on the air the night after it all happened, and obviously we were at the funeral at Moorabbin, and obviously the last year with Stewie Lowe and Chelsea, as you mentioned. But it's obviously a little bit of a different feeling. In previous years, this topic is a somber one. It's a sad one. Obviously we miss him. We miss him around the footy landscape. We miss him in the media. We miss him at our footy club. But I think what's important to remember, and you mentioned a little bit of it, Parko, but his legacy is bigger than just St Kilda Footy Club. What he means to our footy club is all about what our footy club stands for, is loyalty, is standing with your mates, is doing the things, the little things, regardless of the fact that you haven't had the ultimate success or really any success. But we talk now a lot more openly about mental health and men's health because of Danny Frawley. And I think it's important to remember that Danny Frawley was talking about this before Danny Frawley died. Mm-hmm. He walked the walk and he talked the talk. This is not just a reflection and looking back on someone who died and passed the way that he did in those circumstances, but he was talking about this and doing this before that. He was walking the walk. And I think now we're starting to see a lot more of the footy community walking the walk, talking the talk, and really making a difference. And I think that's so important to remember, that Danny Frawley was, as wonderful as he was and is for our footy club, what he was able to do after footy from a mental health perspective, and opening that conversation, starting that conversation was incredible. And now that conversation is just magnified. It's just, elevated and scaled up to a point where it's impossible to ignore. And it's just part of everyday conversation now. I mean, you look back at, earlier this week or on the weekend, there's Bailey Smith. A couple of weeks ago, it's Dustin Martin. There's a number of footy players, Paddy Ryder for our footy club, Zach Jones in our footy club. There's footy players all over the country that are struggling with mental health, with personal issues and things that, historically footy players put in the back pocket and pretend it isn't there. And we're in a place now where, men, I think men especially are getting more and more comfortable about opening up and saying, hey, I've got a problem and it's something that I need to deal with and I'm struggling with and I need some help. And I think a lot of that in our lives, in our environment and in our workspaces can be put down to the work that Danny Frawley started and is now continuing in his name.
And H, I think, as Nick was saying, and as a lot of people have said, I think it reminds us, without being too somber about it with Spud, that it's a reminder that you don't just win the battle. It's not a case of, I fought the battle off and that's the end of that, it can come around again and again and again. And, Danny was a great ambassador in the mental health space, but was obviously extremely susceptible to it over the course of his life. And it was from that inspiration that he was able to draw on that and help others. And I think all of those messages are extremely important.
Oh, absolutely. Probably looking back at the sort of, I guess, almost character he portrayed in the media a lot of the time when he was on Triple M, when he was on SEN, it was always the larrikin. He was always the spark, I guess, in the commentary box a lot of the time. And you sort of think, well, there's a bit of a, I guess, facade in front of him, doing that sort of things at time. And you're sort of thinking, well, is that how he coped with everything? Is that the way that he found that he did that? Is it, and the whole game and day and the couple of weeks, I guess, leading up to it, it's basically all been in his name. And basically, I think he is the sort of person who would be embarrassed to think that everything was dedicated in his name. And if he had the ability to say, stop focusing on me, just focus on the people who need it the most, probably. And that's where you sort of think he always seemed to put a lot of people first from the stories that you hear about. It wasn't like, oh, it's me. It's help these people. So it's a good thing, great thing to have his name up in lights. But I think, as I said, I think he'd find it quite embarrassing going, stop talking about me. I don't want it. I don't want my name to be the big one up in lights. So it's a great message to be able to put out there. Great message put out there under his name, under his banner, because I think they'll putting the banners up again at the end of the grounds again, but we may not see him so much anymore with those big screens there that they've put up. So, but yeah, just the whole message that this has now brought, it's what he's left us with, and yeah, we'll try to promote it as much as we can with pretty much every way we can.
I guess, Nick, my final thought was, I was about 9 years old in that state game when Victoria played South Australia in 95 and Spud organised a lap with Ted Whitten. And I think as a kid, that was the first person I saw in football shed a tear during that particular moment. And, I grew up being a St Kilda supporter who ended up shedding tears as a result of the football club. And then ultimately as a result of Danny in 2019. So it's, it's an interesting full circle that it sort of takes you on. And that was one of those early lessons, I think, that I got from him.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. He, like we said, his legacy is large over our footy club, over our fan base, over our community, both at as a St Kilda community, but also as a footy community. And you're right, that was probably the first time that I think I'd seen a lot of people shed a tear in a footy environment. And then a couple of years later, it was my first time after the 97 grand final. And, like you, sitting in the centre circle at Moorabbin after his funeral, shedding a tear for Spud. And I think we've spoken about this a number of times and I guess my own battle with this sort of stuff, and that's always there. But it's seeing guys like Danny, like Jason Dunstall, like Gary Lyon, like our heroes as kids that come out and talk about their own battles and their own demons and that sort of stuff that give you the ability to, I guess, have perspective, that it's not just you. It's not you in a vacuum. This is part of life. People are dealing with this stuff all over the world, and it's not a personal thing. It doesn't discriminate. It's nothing about you in particular. It's just this is part of life, and it's something that we've got to deal with. And I think the ability for us now to have a much better understanding of how to deal with, how to talk about it, and what to do with this stuff is much better. And like I said before, it's so much of that is down to guys like Danny Frawley.
And H, we touched on it very briefly with Spida. I guess a final thought. We recorded our initial episode on Monday night, which was before the Hall of Fame, but Nicky Winmar certainly worthy of a mention this week before we do wrap things up. Just that 4-minute highlights package with Spida with Plugger speaking was spine tingling, some of those highlights. And it's like, I think there's one on YouTube that goes for 2 hours, but such a gifted footballer that we were so blessed to see playing.
I'll congratulate the people that put it together, finding only managing again down 4 minutes. That's a fair effort in itself. It's as I think we were saying in our group chat, that it's well overdue. We're looking at players who have retired in only just the last few years, who have been already put into there, and you think, well, it's been. What were they retiring in 98 or 99? I think it was 99.
99, yeah.
And 23 years ago. So it's a fair wait. I'm not sure whether there was anything, I guess, behind the scenes, as Spida was saying. He's currently in a really great place. He's found, I guess, happiness within himself, and whether he's knocked it back previously, I don't know, or it just seems strange it's taken that long for this to happen. But I guess the good things come to those that wait. So there's probably not many other players who have been through the club who deserve to be there more. And that's probably, we'll see whether it takes long for him to get elevated. See if it takes as long to get in there elevated as what it is to get in there. So so now got the induction and the statue. There's not many of them. So he's one of a very small group now when you look at it. But the one little thing that I did find a little interesting though was the teams that were listed on the screens when he came up, and they somehow left off the Western Bulldogs, which I found quite interesting. So I sort of thought that and thought,
maybe they forgot.
Sure that's I mean, it was only there for about 2 minutes, but I sort of found a little bit strange they did leave that off. So
he's
I guess it's the main places he was. So
he's got his own Indigenous jumper design as well. But it's a good point that the fact that it's so overdue. I mean, on the weight of his playing career alone deserves to be in there. And then I think the impact that he's had on the game outside of that, from the photo, from the moment, from Victoria Park, deserves to be there for that alone, and what's happened since. The fact that it's 20 years later is bizarre. Absolutely bizarre.
Yeah, it took him a while to get Barks in there, I guess. But who knows? I mean, some of the criteria, I mean, the guy that coached him, I know I'm reasonably close to Terry Wallace, but the fact that, he's not in the Hall of Fame, I think is a disgrace. 3 premierships, 4 best and fairest, 250 games. There are some oversights along the way, and I think Winmar was certainly one of those. But I guess, Nick, I watched that highlights package, and not that we needed reminding, but I think a player that's quick, reasonably tall for a wingman, beautiful long kick, extremely accurate kick, and a tackling machine, and a goal kicker. I think if you plonked him in modern footy now, where the grounds are as they are, you could run on top of the ground. You're playing at Marvel, somebody with precision foot skills like that. He dominated the comp when he played, but I shudder to think what he'd do to the AFL now.
Yeah, I tweeted the other night that I think the closest thing to Nicky Winmar in his prime was Chris Judd in his prime. The West Coast Eagles, Chris Judd. He was quick, he was strong, he was powerful. Kicks, handballs, both feet, both hands, can get up and take a grab. I mean, there weren't too many people that could take a better mark than Nicky Winmar, and he kicked goals. He was a goal-kicking midfielder or wingman. He would be perfectly suited to today's footy. I mean, even more so than he was back in the late 80s, early 90s, and mid-90s. He was the prototype modern footballer. It would have been incredible to see him play in today's footy.
I think that's a nice way to leave it. Obviously, a couple of legends being celebrated for different reasons entirely, but for Saints fans heading along to Marvel on Friday night, I'm sure Spud will be in their thoughts. And the last thing now is for the group to do the right thing and obviously go out there and at least, and the right thing isn't necessarily always winning, but the right thing is, going about it in the right way that would make legends of the club like Danny Frawley particularly proud. So thanks for tuning into our second episode, special edition episode for the week, and go Saints.
The AFL has paid tribute to late St Kilda legend Danny Frawley with the Saints game delayed by 2 minutes to encourage people to check in on their mates.
The whole concept of just taking time out to talk to your mates, to find out what's going wrong and to try and fix it and not suffer in silence was a brilliant one. I thought it was handled really well by the St Kilda Football Club.
Mental health is definitely such an important thing, and a lot of people don't fully recognise that just like when you have a physical injury in sport, the same thing goes as a mental injury. And trying to play through that, some people might think it's something you can do, but we're going to take it a bit more serious, and just being equipped with what to do, what to know, how to pick up on the signs if someone is struggling. It is something really simple but makes a huge difference.
In his 240 games with St Kilda, Danny Frawley left a lasting legacy. But this building at Moorabbin might just be his ultimate contribution.
Danny's vision was that our community looks after each other, whether that's players, past players, the broader community, and to do more to look after each other's mental health in particular.
It was a day of pride and reflection at St Kilda, where the club flung open the doors to the Danny Frawley Centre.
The late champion's family hopes it will prove a game changer for men struggling with mental health.
As well as its state-of-the-art facilities, crucially, the centre will give people access to the best psychologists and mental health researchers, an investment that has the potential to change and save lives.
You can survive if you get the right help. And with this building, what we're doing, we can get you the help.